In the heart of Kejoni village, where the golden sun kissed the vast fields and the rivers whispered secrets of old, there lived a woman unlike any other. Her name was Nia. She was breathtaking, her dark skin glowed like polished onyx, and her eyes, deep and enchanting, held the weight of 1,000 untold stories. But while Nia's beauty mesmerized the villagers, it was her mystery that truly captured their curiosity. Every morning, she would walk into the bustling marketplace, carrying baskets of the most exotic and rare fruits, mangoes as red as fire, bananas so sweet they melted on the tongue, and citrus that shimmered like gold under the sun. No one in the village had ever seen such fruits before, and no one knew where she got them from. Nia was gentle, kind, and polite, but she kept to herself. She never lingered in the village once the sun began to set. While others laughed, gossiped, and celebrated life, Nia would silently pack her things and disappear into the forest beyond the hills, her home, hidden away from all eyes. The men of Kejoni were intrigued. Many suitors sought Nia's heart. Young warriors, wealthy merchants, even the chief's son, all had tried to court her, yet she always refused. One day, a confident young man named Jobori arrived in Kejoni. He was a trader, traveling from village to village, dealing in fine cloth and spices. He was known not just for his sharp business mind but also for his ability to charm anyone with his words. When Jobori first laid eyes on Nia at the market, he was captivated. She wasn't just beautiful, she moved like a secret, carrying herself with a quiet grace that made the world around her seem slower, softer, and more mysterious. A persistent suitor. Jabari approached her stall with a confident smile. "Your fruits are unlike anything I have seen before," he said, picking up a mango and examining it. "Where do you find such treasures?" Nia smiled faintly, her dark eyes unreadable. "The trees are kind to me," she replied simply. Jabari chuckled, intrigued. "Then perhaps I should learn how to befriend trees the way you do." Nia only shook her head, offering him the mango as a gift. "Kindness is enough," she said softly. From that day on, Jabari visited the market every morning, drawn to Nia in a way he couldn't explain. He helped her carry her baskets, stayed long after he finished his own business, and found himself growing attached to her quiet nature. Unlike the other men who had pursued her, Jabari wasn't just enchanted by her beauty, he wanted to know her secrets. But no matter how many times he asked about her past, Nia never spoke of it. A village of whispered suspicions. The people of Kejoni village began to whisper about Nia's mystery. "Where does she go at night?" one elder muttered. "Why does she never accept a husband?" another asked. Some believed she was a spirit, a creature of the forest, sent to bewitch men. Others thought she was hiding a dark past. One evening, as Nia prepared to leave the market, Jabari stepped in front of her. "Let me walk you home," he offered. Nia hesitated. The sun was already dipping beyond the trees, and shadows stretched long across the land. She glanced toward the path leading out of the village, the one she always took alone. Finally, she whispered, "You should not follow me." Jabari smiled, undeterred. "And why not?" Nia looked at him, something flickering behind her dark eyes. "Because some secrets are meant to stay hidden." And with that, she turned and vanished into the forest, leaving Jabari standing alone, more determined than ever to uncover the truth about the woman no one truly knew. Jabari had always been a man who got what he wanted. In every village he had traveled to, no woman had ever turned away his charm. But Nia was different, she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, a mystery that refused to be unraveled. And the more she resisted him, the more determined he became. For weeks, he continued visiting the market every morning, helping her set up her stall, carrying her baskets, and even keeping her company as she sold her fruits. The villagers watched with amusement and curiosity, whispering among themselves, "He will never win her heart. Nia is not like other women." If he only knew the truth, he would run. But Jabari was not easily discouraged. One evening, as the market wound down and the last of the villagers left, he watched Nia prepare to leave. This time, he didn't ask. He simply followed her. A forbidden path. Nia walked gracefully, her basket of unsold fruits balanced perfectly on her hip. She took the winding path out of the village, one that led deep into the forest. No one ever went that way at night. Jabari followed at a distance, careful not to make a sound. The deeper they went, the thicker the trees became, the air cooler, the sounds of the village fading behind them. The only light was the faint glow of fireflies, flickering like tiny stars. Suddenly, Nia stopped. Without turning around, she spoke. "Why do you follow me, Jabari?" Her voice was calm, but there was something in it, something ancient and knowing, as if she had expected this all along. Jabari hesitated before stepping forward. "Because I want to know you, Nia. The real you." She turned slowly, her dark eyes locking onto his. "And if the truth is something you do not wish to know?" Jabari's heart pounded. "Then let me decide for myself." For a long moment, Nia studied him. Then, she sighed and said, "Go home, Jabari. Some things are best left unseen." She turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Jabari stood there, torn between his curiosity and the warning in her voice. But as much as he wanted to listen, something deep inside him told him he was closer than ever to discovering her secret. A love that could not be ignored. Days passed, and Jabari continued to see Nia in the market. Though she pretended nothing had changed, he could sense the tension in her. One evening, he waited for her after she closed her store. This time, he did not ask to follow her. Instead, he looked into her eyes and said, "I will not stop, Nia. I don't care what you are hiding. I only know that I want to be with you." Nia's hands tightened around her basket. For the first time, she looked afraid. "You do not know what you are asking for," she whispered. "Then tell me," Jabari urged. She looked away, as if struggling with something deep within her. Then, finally, she said something he never expected. "If you truly wish to be with me, then marry me." Jabari stared in shock. He had expected another rejection, another warning. But instead, she was offering herself to him. "Nia," he breathed, searching her face. "Are you sure?" She nodded, but there was sadness in her eyes. "You say you want me, Jabari. But love is not just about desire, it is about accepting the unknown." Jabari's heart raced. He had chased her for so long, and now she was giving herself to him. "I will marry you," he said. "No matter what." But deep in her heart, Nia knew that he had no idea what he was truly promising. The news spread like wildfire. "Nia is getting married." The villagers of Kejoni were stunned. The woman who had rejected every suitor, the woman cloaked in mystery, had finally accepted a man's proposal. Some were overjoyed. Others were uneasy. The village elders gathered in whispers. "This is unnatural," one murmured. "She has refused all men for years. Why now?" An old woman, hunched with age and wisdom, nodded solemnly. "There is more to this than meets the eye. Mark my words." But Jabari, blinded by his love, heard none of the warnings. The wedding preparations. The preparations for the grand wedding began immediately. The villagers decorated the town square with bright fabrics and fragrant flowers. Women sang traditional songs, their voices carrying over the rolling hills. Jabari stood tall and proud, his heart full. He had won Nia's love. But Nia, she was quiet. Too quiet. While others laughed and celebrated, she stood at the edge of the crowd, her dark eyes watching the horizon. It was as if she were waiting for something. Or someone. a warning from the shadows. On the eve of the wedding, as the village slept, a shadow slipped into Jabari's home. An old woman, wrapped in tattered robes, her hair like silver mist, stood in the dim candlelight. "Jabari," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves in the wind. Jabari bolted upright. "Who are you?" The old woman stepped forward. Her eyes glowed with an eerie light. "I have come to warn you," she whispered. "Turn away from this path. Leave Nia before it is too late." Jabari's fist clenched. "I love her. Nothing will change my mind." The old woman sighed deeply. "Then you are a fool. You do not know what you have married." And before Jabari could question her, she vanished into thin air. The wedding night. The ceremony was beautiful. Nia looked breathtaking in her deep emerald dress, her hair braided with gold and ivory beads. Jabari could hardly breathe as he took her hand. "I will love you always," he whispered. Nia smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. The village danced, feasted, and rejoiced until the moon hung high in the sky. Finally, the couple was led to their new home. The villagers cheered as they disappeared inside. But the moment the door shut, Nia's body tensed. Jabari frowned. "What's wrong?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Just promise me, no matter what happens tonight, you will not be afraid." Jabari laughed. "Afraid? Of what?" Nia's hands trembled. "Just promise me," she whispered. Jabari's smile faded, but he nodded. "I promise." The transformation. Midnight struck. The room was dimly lit, the air warm and thick with the scent of burning oil lamps. Nia suddenly gasped, clutching her stomach. "Nia!" Jabari rushed forward, but she staggered back. Don't touch me," she cried. Her body convulsed. Her skin rippled. Her breathing became ragged. Then, before Jabari's horrified eyes, she began to change. Her smooth, dark skin hardened into iridescent scales. Her delicate fingers elongated, curling into sharp talons. Her spine stretched, twisted, cracked, until she was no longer standing, but slithering. Her face was the last to change. Her eyes, once warm and human, became golden, reptilian slits. Jabari staggered back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Nia," he whispered. The massive serpent before him lifted its head, staring at him with sorrow. "I never wanted you to see this." Jabari's words spun. His heart pounded like a war drum. His limbs screamed at him to run, flee, escape. But he stood frozen, staring at the monstrous form of the woman he had vowed to love. A single, agonizing thought tore through his mind. What have I married? Jabari's heart pounded like a war drum. The woman he had married, the woman he had fought so hard to have, was now a massive serpent, coiled in the dim candlelight of their wedding chamber. The creature's golden eyes watched him, filled not with malice, but with sorrow. "I never wanted you to see this." Her voice was still Nia's, soft and familiar, but it echoed strangely, as if it came from deep within the earth. Jabari's mind raced. This had to be a dream. A trick. A curse. His body screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. "Nia." His voice came out in a choked whisper. What are you?" A curse revealed. The massive serpent slithered closer, its glistening black scales shimmering under the dim candlelight. "You wish to know my secrets," Nia whispered. "Now, you do." Jabari's breath was ragged, his chest rising and falling too fast. "This isn't real," he muttered, backing away. "It can't be real." Nia lowered her massive head, sadness flickering in her golden eyes. "It is. And I am sorry." Jabari stumbled against the wall, his hands gripping the wooden frame of their bed. His mind screamed for answers. Tell me the truth, he demanded, his voice hoarse. Tell me everything. Nia sighed, a long, heavy sound, filled with ancient pain. I was not born like this, she began. Long ago, my mother was a woman like any other. Beautiful, kind, and deeply in love. But she fell for a man who was not meant for her, a man who carried the blood of the serpent gods. Jabari swallowed hard, unable to tear his eyes away from her massive form. My mother did not know the price of such love, Nia continued. The gods were angry. They cursed her, and every daughter born from her bloodline. Jabari's stomach twisted. Cursed, how? Nia's massive coils shifted uneasily. Every daughter in my family must hide her true form. We are born human, but on the night of our wedding, we return to what we truly are. Jabari's chest tightened. You knew, he breathed. You knew this would happen. Nia's eyes flickered with pain. Yes. Jabari felt betrayal slam into him like a tidal wave. Then why did you marry me? He demanded. Because I had hope, Nia whispered. Hope that love might break the curse. That you might see me and not be afraid. Jabari felt his knees weaken. See her and not be afraid. How could he not be afraid? A husband's choice. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Jabari's mind screamed at him, run, flee, leave her behind. But his heart ached. He had fought for Nia. He had chased after her, sworn to love her, vowed that nothing would change his devotion. And now, he had seen her true form. Did that change everything? Nia watched him, unmoving. You can go, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. If you choose to leave, I will not stop you. Jabari's breath caught. Leave. The door stood just a few feet away. If he ran, the villagers would believe him. They would take him in, call him a victim, a man who had narrowly escaped a monster's grasp. But if he stayed... Jabari stared at Nia, his heart a battlefield of fear and love. Could he love her? Like this? Did love only belong to the human form? The air in the room felt thick with destiny. Jabari had to choose. Would he flee from the woman he had vowed to love, or would he stand beside her, no matter what she was? Jabari stood frozen, his heart thundering against his ribs. The door was just a few feet away. If he ran now, he could escape this nightmare, return to the village, tell the elders, and never look back. But his eyes flickered to Nia. She wasn't attacking him. She wasn't trying to trap him. She simply sat there, coiled in the dim candlelight, her golden serpent eyes filled with pain and quiet acceptance. You can go. Her words echoed in his mind. She was giving him a choice. But how could she be so calm? Did she truly expect him to stay? Did she really believe that love could survive this? Jabari's hands clenched into fists. His body screamed at him to run, but his heart whispered something else. He had loved Nia before tonight. He had fought for her, chased after her, begged for her love. Could one night undo all of that? Jabari exhaled shakily. He forced himself to look at her, really look at her. Yes, she was a serpent now. But wasn't she still Nia? Did love belong only to the human form? A husband's decision. Jabari took a slow step forward. Nia's massive serpent body tensed, as if preparing for rejection. He took another step. Then another. And finally, he did what no man had ever done. He reached out and touched her. Nia flinched under his hand. Her scales were smooth and cool beneath his fingers. Jabari swallowed, his throat dry. You're still Nia. A sharp inhale. A flicker of surprise in her golden eyes. You do not fear me, she whispered. Jabari hesitated before answering. I do. But I love you more than I fear you. Nia's breath hitched. A trembling sound, part sob, part something ancient and broken. You do not know what you are saying, she whispered. Jabari shook his head. Then tell me. Show me everything. The truth of the curse. For the first time, Nia told her full story. Long ago, in the time of the gods, her ancestors had lived among humans in peace. They were not monsters, not demons, but guardians of the forest, beings of wisdom and power. But a terrible betrayal had shattered that peace. A human man, one they had trusted, had fallen in love with a serpent woman and deceived her. He had promised love but had instead used her for power, seeking the secrets of her people. The gods, enraged, had cast down a curse upon all daughters of the serpent lineage. You will love, but you will never be loved in return. Any man who weds you will see your true form, and will abandon you in fear. Jabari's throat tightened. So that is why you never accepted a husband before me? Nia nodded. I had seen it happen before. Every woman of my bloodline has lost their love on the night of their wedding. She looked away. I thought, maybe, it would be different with you. Jabari's hands tightened at his sides. His mind was spinning, but one thing was clear. The curse was not just a punishment. It was a test. No man had ever stayed. No man had ever chosen love over fear. Jabari looked at Nia, his wife, the woman he had pursued relentlessly, the woman he had promised to love. And he made his choice. Breaking the cycle. He knelt before her massive coiled form. If the gods cursed your ancestors because of a man's betrayal, he said softly, then maybe a man's loyalty can break it. Nia's golden eyes widened. Jabari reached up, cupping her massive serpent's head with his hands. I love you, Nia, he said, his voice steady. In any form. Always. A shudder ran through her massive body. The air grew thick with unseen power. The walls trembled. The candles flickered wildly. And then, a flash of blinding light. Jabari fell back, covering his eyes. When he opened them, Nia was no longer a serpent. She was human again. Her dark skin glowed in the dim light, her braided hair falling around her shoulders. But her golden serpent eyes remained, filled with shock and disbelief. The curse. She whispered, touching her face, her hands trembling. It's gone. Jabari smiled. Looks like love wins after all. And for the first time in centuries, a serpent bride was not abandoned. She was loved. The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting golden light upon Kijoni village. The night's events still weighed heavily on Jabari and Nia as they stood together, hand in hand, outside their home. Jabari had chosen love over fear. He had stayed. And in doing so, something impossible had happened, the ancient curse had been broken. But the village did not know that. All they knew was that, in the dead of night, a scream had echoed through the square. And that scream had come from Jabari. The village in panic. A loud pounding came at their door. Jabari. Open up, a voice demanded. Jabari exchanged a glance with Nia before stepping forward. He unlatched the door to find a crowd gathered outside, villagers, warriors, and the village elders. Fear flickered in their eyes. The chief elder, an old man named Mzitembo, stepped forward, his wrinkled face set with deep concern. Jabari, he said slowly, his gaze shifting to Nia, we heard terrible sounds from your home last night. Jabari hesitated. He knew the village had feared Nia's secrecy for years. If they knew the truth, would they accept it? We must ask, Mzitembo continued. Did she do something to you? A murmur swept through the crowd. Some villagers clutched charms around their necks. Others whispered about dark spirits and hidden curses. Jabari squared his shoulders. He could feel Nia trembling beside him. She is my wife, he said firmly. And she has done nothing wrong. The accusation. A younger elder, a stern woman named Mama Yora, stepped forward. She had never trusted Nia. We have always known there was something unnatural about this woman, Mama Yora said, her voice sharp. She hides in the forest. She refuses every man for years, and now, suddenly, she weds. This is not normal. She is not normal, another villager muttered. She is cursed, someone else whispered. Jabari felt anger rise in his chest. I have seen her secret, he declared, his voice ringing across the square. And I chose to stay. A hush fell over the crowd. Mzee Tembo's gaze darkened. Then tell us, Jabari, he said, what secret does your wife hide? The truth revealed. Jabari turned to Nia. She was pale, her fingers tightening around his. She had spent her life running from this moment. But now, there was no more hiding. Taking a deep breath, Nia stepped forward. The stories you whisper about me are true, she said, her voice steady. I was born under a curse. A curse placed upon my ancestors long ago. The villagers stiffened. Nia's voice wavered, but she pressed on. On the night of my wedding, I was meant to return to my true form, the serpent. Every man who had ever loved a woman of my bloodline has abandoned her in fear. Gasps erupted from the villagers. Some stepped back, clutching their beads and amulets. Mama Yora pointed an accusing finger. So you admit it? You are a creature of darkness. No. Jabari's voice was like steel. She is my wife. The crowd fell silent. Jabari took Nia's hand and held it up for all to see. I did not abandon her. I did not run. I chose love over fear. And because of that, he turned to Nia, looking into her golden eyes. The curse is broken. The elders' judgment. The elders murmured amongst themselves. The villagers looked at one another, unsure of what to believe. Impossible, Mama Yora hissed. Curses cannot be broken. Mzee Tembo studied Nia carefully. Then, in a slow, measured voice, he asked, show us. Nia closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, the world was still. Then, before the eyes of the entire village, a golden shimmer rippled over her skin. Her human form flickered, just for an instant, just long enough for them to see the scales beneath. Then, the shimmer faded, and she was fully human once more. The village gasped. The gods, one elder whispered. They have lifted the curse. Mzee Tembo studied Nia for a long time. Then he turned to the villagers. This woman has lived among us for years. She has harmed no one. She has given us nothing but kindness. His old eyes swept over the crowd. And when the truth of her nature was revealed, she was not the one who turned away, it was we who feared her. A deep silence followed his words. Then, slowly, the fear began to fade. One by one, the villagers lowered their charms. Their gazes softened. And then, the voice rang out. If the gods have forgiven her, then who are we to hold on to fear? The crowd stirred. And then, a ripple of acceptance spread through the people of Kejoni. One by one, they bowed their heads in respect. And at last, Nia was no longer a woman to be feared. She was simply one of them. A future rewritten. That night, Nia and Jabari stood side by side, looking over their village, their home. She turned to him, eyes shining with gratitude and love. I never thought I would be free, she whispered. Jabari smiled, brushing a loose braid from her face. You were always free, Nia. And for the first time in generations, a serpent bride had not been abandoned. She had been chosen. The night was still, the air warm and filled with the soft hum of crickets. In the heart of Kejoni village, a story that had been passed down for generations had finally changed. Nia was no longer an outcast. She was no longer a woman of mystery, feared and whispered about in the market. She was Jabari's wife. A daughter of Kejoni. One of them. And for the first time in history, a serpent bride had been loved, not abandoned. A new beginning. The morning after the village elders accepted her, Nia walked freely through the market. For the first time, no one whispered in fear as she passed. No one avoided her gaze. Instead, the villagers greeted her with warm smiles. Some even touched her arm in passing, a small but powerful gesture. A sign that they saw her as one of their own. Jabari walked beside her, his head held high. His hand rested gently on her lower back, a silent promise that he would always stand beside her. The final test. But though the villagers had accepted her, there was one final test left to face. They had to return to the forest, to the home of Nia's people. Would they believe the curse was truly broken? Would they accept that a human man had done what no man before him could? As the sun set, Nia and Jabari journeyed deep into the woods, where the trees whispered ancient secrets and the air felt thick with unseen power. Finally, they reached the sacred clearing, where Nia's ancestors had once roamed freely. A gust of wind stirred the leaves. A presence surrounded them, unseen but powerful. Then, a voice, deep and eternal, spoke from the air itself. You have defied fate. Jabari stood his ground. You have broken what was meant to last forever. Nia lifted her chin, her golden eyes shining. I have found love. A love that was strong enough to rewrite our story. A deep silence followed. Then, a strange golden light began to swirl around them. Jabari felt a warmth settle in his chest. And suddenly, he knew. The curse wasn't just lifted from Nia. It was lifted from all the daughters of our bloodline. For the first time in centuries, the serpent women were free. Free to love. Free to live. Free to choose their own fates. A story that would be remembered forever. As Nia and Jabari returned to Kejoni, the village welcomed them not as a man and his cursed wife, but as a legend. A story of love, defiance, and fate rewritten. For generations to come, the villagers would tell their children about the man who loved the serpent bride and the woman who was never abandoned. And in the heart of Kejoni, under the golden glow of the setting sun, Jabari and Nia walked forward, hand in hand, side by side, toward a future that had never before been possible. Together. Forever.